Hello and welcome to the webinar New in 2022 for Retirement Plan Sponsors. Before we jump into lifetime income illustrations, let's review a few introductory details. We will be recording this webinar. The link to the recording will be sent to all registrants. You may submit questions or comments during the presentation in the questions section in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. If your question is not addressed in the content of the presentation, a retirement plan specialist will follow up with you to address your question. After the end of the webinar, you will see a survey pop up before exiting. Please take a few seconds to fill it out as we greatly appreciate your feedback. Now I have the pleasure of introducing you to our speaker today, Fred Reish. Fred is a partner in the international law firm of Fager, Drinker, Biddle & Reith, LLP. His practice focuses on fiduciary responsibility, prohibited transaction, and plan qualification issues. He has been recognized as one of the legends of the retirement industry by both Plan Sponsor and Plan Advisor magazines. He has also been given Lifetime Achievement Awards by Institutional Investor and Plan Sponsor publications and received recognition by the Internal Revenue Service for his contributions to the retirement community. As a noted authority on retirement plans and plan management, Fred counsels plan sponsors, service providers, and registered investment advisors on fiduciary responsibility, prohibited transactions under federal law, federal audits, and pension plan disputes. Thank you, Fred, for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to Hub for having me. Thanks for the kind introduction. Thanks to the Hartford for sponsoring this. But most of all, thanks to all of y'all listening to this. I'm glad to have the opportunity to be with you today and to talk about some really interesting subjects that are going to impact you and your plan almost immediately. So with that, let's take a look at the agenda. The first thing I'm going to talk about today, and the most significant thing, is the retirement income illustrations. Technically, they're called lifetime income illustrations, and Congress and the Department of Labor have mandated that you do those if you sponsor a defined contribution plan. We'll get into the details of that in a few minutes, but that is a mandate. There is no choice. Fortunately, there's probably more help there than you realize, but it's important to know what's happening. Secondly, there are some alternatives. You need to think about whether these new lifetime income illustrations are giving your employees the right information, whether they're just going to confuse them, whether you need additional education that your providers can give to your participants, and so on. So it requires some thought on your part as to the best way to move forward now that these rules apply. Then if you decide you do want to provide lifetime income for your participants, not just illustrations of numbers, but actual lifetime income vehicles for your participants, there's some new rules about how to do it that frankly make it a lot easier. So the Congress feels that there's a need for participants and retirees to have lifetime income, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible on plan sponsors to include that in their plans. Then some new special distribution issue rules. For example, if you do include lifetime income in your plan, but you decide to switch to a different provider and the employees want to keep their lifetime income that they've paid for so far, then they can roll it over into an IRA. So there's a special distribution rule that allows that so that employers aren't worried about, oh my goodness, if I provide a new type of benefit in my plan and I switch providers, am I going to hurt my employees where they can't continue to have the benefit they paid for? And then we'll wrap up the program by talking about some of the practical issues that are involved and really some of the things you should be thinking about if you want to move down this path going forward. So with that introduction and with that agenda, let's jump right into the program by talking about some of the policy issues. As I was thinking about talking to you all today, I thought I would talk about bad news, good news, and important news. And what I mean by that is the bad news is there is this new mandate. It's not an option, you have to do it. The good news is whether you know it or not, Your providers, your plan's record keeper, has been working on this for months since the rules became final. And for virtually all of you, if not all of you, the provider is going to take care of satisfying the legal requirements of this new mandate, and they'll do it automatically. The important news, though, is you need to understand what's going on, and that you need to make decisions about how to handle this, what other services or products, what other information you want your plan and your providers to give to your participants. And as we get into this, I think you'll agree with me that these new lifetime income illustrations are going to be somewhat confusing. So, well, before I get down into those weeds, let's talk a little bit about why. Why is this happening? Why is it happening now? As you know from the years that you've sponsored a retirement plan or that you've been a participant in a plan, the conversation has generally been about making sure you get into the plan, defer at least enough to get the employer's matching contribution, invest in a good way. If you can't figure it out, put your money in a target date fund. I mean, those I'm not saying that you personally engaged in each and every one of those conversations, but those are the typical conversations that participants and even plan sponsors have in looking at their plans. But that's very much a front end, setting up the plan, looking at the plan from the front. What about the back end? Well, the back end is people are retiring on 401k plan benefits, and they have to make them last for a lifetime. To put some numbers on that, there are over 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring right now, however you want to define retiring, claiming Social Security, reaching age 65, over 10,000 a day, and they are taking over 500 billion a year out of retirement plans. A lot's rolling over. And Congress looks at that and says, gee, how do we help people take that money, either leave it in the plan and take monthly payments out of there, roll it to an IRA, take monthly payments out of there, but how do we make it last for their lifetimes? Do they know how much they can withdraw each month? Do they know how to invest in retirement? Do they even know what their life expectancies are? For example, a husband and wife age 65, one of them will probably be alive 25 years from now. Do people really realize that, in effect, when you retire, a husband and wife, a team, a marital team retires, that one of them, that effectively their 401k account plus the lump sum value of their Social Security, for most people, that's substantially all there is, that combined is effectively a prepaid 25-year vacation. Think about that. Think about it expressed in that way, and you'll realize how difficult it is. It involves sophisticated investment decisions, actuarial decisions, withdrawal decisions, 3%, 4%, 5% per year, 6%, which is the right number to make it have a good chance of sustainability. So the government is looking at that issue and saying, gee, we really need to do something about this. We really need to help people accumulate enough money so that they know how much they need to accumulate, or at least they have a rough idea of how much they need in order to retire. And then secondly, we need to help them take that and use it as a lifetime income. Don't view your account balance as wealth, but view it as a source of lifetime income. So these concerns, these policy concerns, became part of what we call the Secure Act. That was a law passed in late 2019. And as we go to the next slide, it'll show you some of the main provisions in the Secure Act that we're going to talk about now. And the theme on this slide is now. These are now issues. Lifetime income illustrations. The beginning with your December 31 account statements, which for most providers will issue those to participants in February at some point. And it will have all of this information on the statement. Some will delay it till a little bit later in the year, but it has to get out in the first half of the year. And I think most are going to do it in February. And then every year in February from now on, participants will be given lifetime income illustrations. That's the mandate we're talking about. That portability of the lifetime income option, if you have an option in your plan, if you decide to include one, there's no mandate to have a lifetime income option. But if you decide to do one, the ability for participants to roll that over to an IRA, if they don't, if you decide to switch to another provider that doesn't offer that option, that's available right now. That's already part of the law. It's already had its effective date. And then finally, there's a fiduciary safe harbor for selecting an insurance company to provide guaranteed lifetime income benefits to your employees. And as you'll see when we get into that it's really, really easy to satisfy, because Congress, again, wants to encourage plan sponsors to include guaranteed lifetime income benefits in their plan, as well as mandating the illustrations. As this suggests, the benefit of mandating the illustrations is that it'll help participants understand, by looking at what their account balance looks like when expressed as income. Do I have enough money to retire? Can I retire on that monthly income in my illustration? Or do I need to keep working and saving and accumulating more money? And then secondly, it's going to pretty obviously raise the question, okay, now I have enough money. How do I get that money in my 401k account, for example, to be a lifetime income amount? How do I take, let's pick a number. How do I take that $100,000 in my 401k account and get it to pay the $500 a month that the lifetime income illustration shows? And so that's why there may be a need for products and services and plan sponsors who want to, but they're not required to, but plan sponsors who want to provide these additional services and products. So all of these rules are effective now. We're now in this arena. We're not talking about something that's going to happen down the line. Let me move now to talking about the lifetime income illustrations themselves. As this slide shows, that the lifetime income illustrations has to provide a lifetime, what the DOL calls a lifetime income stream equivalent of the total benefits accrued with respect to the participants. That's legalese. What it really means is it has to be an illustration of how much that participant's account balance, not some hypothetical participant, but that actual participant's account balance on December 31 will show if it were paid, if the participant were age 67 this December 31, and it were converted to an annuity-like stream of payments. That's why a minute ago when I said a $100,000 account balance showing as $500 a month, first off, that is roughly correct. That is roughly what the illustration will look like for that dollar amount. Secondly, that shows how it looks when it's expressed as an annuity. It doesn't mean the money has to come out as an annuity. There's no annuity requirement at all. It's just that it's shown as if it were an annuity. For example, as if that $100,000 bought an annuity for that participant, for the participant's life. And it has to be expressed as monthly payment. So, and the rationale for that is that people pay their bills monthly, their rent, their phone bill, their car payment. We live more or less in a monthly environment, and the required illustrations reflect that. Also, it has to show for every participant what a single life annuity, if they just bought an annuity for their life based on their age, would look like. And it also has to show what a joint and survivor annuity would look like, assuming that the participant and the participant's spouse were the same age as the participant. So that could be a little bit confusing to a participant who isn't married. Why are you showing me this? Or to somebody like me, whose wife is 10 years younger, why are you assuming that my spouse is my age? That's just not the case. With me, with a spouse, wife 10 years younger, the annuity would buy less because her life expectancy is obviously longer than mine. The lump sum would buy a smaller annuity for that. So when I say that there could be some confusion, there's a couple examples right there. And I'll give you some more examples as we move forward. In fact, if we move forward to the next slide, I will give you a little more information about this. The Secure Act said to the Department of Labor, You have to issue guidance on exactly how employers do this. And there should be no judgment left, because we don't want employers to feel like they have to decide what the assumptions should be, or that they have to decide how the illustration should be presented, for fear that they could do it wrong and might get sued. And so Congress said to the Department of Labor, spell it all out with mathematical precision, so that plan sponsors don't have to worry about doing this. In fact, they won't even have to think about doing this, because it'll be their chapter and verse. The Congress also said in the Secure Act and Department of Labor, you have to issue your regulation within 12 months, and these rules, the mandate, can't become effective until 12 months after that, to give everybody time to adjust. So, in fact, if we move to the next slide, let me just point out a couple more details though before I follow up on this. Let's look at this slide. I've already pointed out that the mandated lifetime income illustrations requirement is in the law, and the DOL has written the regulations to implement it. But I do want to point out that it will be on the participant benefit statement. That is, every quarter, for example, for a 401k plan, a participant in the plan gets a benefit statement. They used to be delivered in paper in the old days. Nowadays, it's email from the provider that says your benefit statement for December 31, for example, has been posted on the website. Click here to go to the website and see what your account looks like. And these lifetime income illustrations don't have to be on every participant benefit statement. They just have to be on one a year. So since quarterly statements are given by 401k plans, and the lifetime income illustrations only have to be once a year, they'll probably be on the year-end one, the December 31, as in my illustrations earlier in this talk, we're talking about a December 31 statement, because that means that tends to be when people do their planning or they're thinking about their account balance. It's based on that December 31 statement. So once a year they will get this. They get their statements quarterly. This has to be on one of those statements. It'll probably be the fourth quarter statement. Also, I wanted to point out that, as I said a second ago, all of the assumptions that are used for the illustrations are laid out by the Department of Labor. You don't have to worry about what those are. In fact, in a second, I'll give you a look at them only to show you how detailed they are. But I want to point out mainly on this slide the limitation on liability that Congress gave to plan sponsors. It's called a fiduciary safe harbor for issuing these illustrations. Why? Well, the Congress was concerned that plan sponsors would come to them through their trade associations and otherwise and say, hey, what if these illustrations are wrong? What if a participant relies on these illustrations and they stop saving, or they retire, or they make decisions that are bad decisions based on bad information? We don't want to get sued because of that. Congress said, look, we're going to make the DOL lay out all the rules specifically so that you don't have to worry about what the rules are. And secondly, if you follow what the Department of Labor said, then we give you this fiduciary safe harbor. It says, no plan fiduciary, plan sponsor, or other person shall have any liability under ERISA for providing the lifetime income illustrations, so long as you follow the rules. That is about as broad a protection as you can possibly receive. So if you follow the rules and provide the illustrations accordingly, no participant could ever legally complain that you gave them bad information. I say you, but let me reemphasize that this is being done by your providers, by your record keepers. If they haven't contacted you already, I assume they will in the next few weeks. If you don't hear from them, though, ask your advisor to contact them on your behalf, make sure that it's being taken care of. Because even though I think your providers will automatically take care of this for you, the law says it's your responsibility as a plan sponsor to make sure it's done. So if you haven't heard anything and you don't hear anything in the next few weeks, contact your provider, have your advisor contact your provider, and make sure that it's being done on your behalf. I would go on to say, and if it isn't, you have to take care of it. But I'm so confident that they are taking care of it for you that I think that you contact the provider is really just to make sure they are, and that their answer will be yes. So there could be a few cases where people have, let's say, profit sharing plans where they don't have a record keeper for the plan. They just take care of it themselves, and maybe they have a third-party administrator do the compliance work for them. In that case, then yes, you're going to have to do these illustrations yourself. So if you have a 401k plan, you almost certainly have a provider that will do it. If you have a profit sharing plan that doesn't have a record keeper, then you really need to look into it right now and make sure it's being taken care of. Same thing for if you have a money purchase pension plan, but less worry if you have a 401k plan. Okay, let's go to the next slide and pick up with how this is actually going to work. As I've already suggested, the Department of Labor did come out with their final regulation, and that shows on the next slide. The final regulation was issued on September 18th, 2020. So that means September of 2021, the 12 months went by and the rule became effective. So when I said earlier the rule is effective now, technically it became effective in September of 2021, and you have 12 months after that to start providing these illustrations. Well, the first quarterly statements after that were September 30. Obviously, those haven't, you didn't include them, these lifetime income illustrations on those statements, or you would know about it. Frankly, I know just from the industry that virtually nobody did. So December 31 is the most likely date, and that's coming up in just a couple, the statements are coming up in just a few weeks for this past December 31. Next, it could be March 31, or it could be June 30. If you don't have these lifetime income illustrations provided to your participants by the June 30 statement, then this law will have been violated, and it will be a fiduciary breach. So I encourage you to make sure this is being taken care of, but in the somewhat informal way that I expressed earlier for 401k plans, but certainly for profit sharing and money purchase pension plans, look into it now because you may have an issue. The benefit statements have to include, as always, the participant's account balance. And the regulation requires that you use for the illustration the participant's age of 67. That may not strike you as much. You may wonder why not 65? That's the nominal retirement age in America. And you may wonder why I'm making such a big deal out of it. Well, let me answer the first question first. The reason they're using 67 is because that is now, for most people, the Social Security retirement age. And as people are working older and older, which in fact is happening, the DOL felt that it would be good for people to be able to look at their 67 account balance lifetime income illustration and their 67 Social Security projection and see what their combined income would be for retirement planning. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. So that part I think is logical, and I would support. The second part, the more problematic part, gives me some grief though, and that is everyone is assumed to be 67 on the date used for the quarterly statement. So I've been saying December 31, 2021 is the date, the account balance that'll be used for the quarterly statement. So let's go back to my hypothetical that everyone has $100,000, or that $100,000 is the account balance. But this time, let's assume there's a 47-year-old with a $100,000 account balance, a 57-year-old with a $100,000 account balance, and a 67-year-old participant with a $100,000 account balance. They are all three going to be assumed to be 67 on December 31, 2021. Now, don't you think that's a little confusing? And to make it even worse, each of their $100,000 will show that it provides a benefit of approximately $500 per month. But we know that the 47-year-old is going to continue to make more deferrals. We know that the 47-year-old's investments are going to compound for 20 years. So it's going to be much larger in reality. And we know that the 57-year-old, the situation's similar, but only for 10 years. So it's going to be bigger. And we know that for the 67-year-old, yeah, it might be roughly correct. In other words, it's going to be misleading as all get out to the 47-year-old and the 57-year-old. And if you think about that, think about how misleading it'll be to the 37-year-old and the 27-year-old participant in your plan. So the issue in my mind that raises is, do you want to go to your record keeper, to your providers and say, you know, we understand we have to do these mandated illustrations, but we would also like to do projections. At the very least, we would like for you to project a reasonable return on the account balances up to age 67 and show the 47-year-old, the 57, and the 57-year-old, in my hypothetical, what it would look like just based on increased earnings alone, much less additional deferrals and contributions. In other words, there are ways. Service providers, not all of them, but many of them, have systems to be able to provide these additional illustrations or projections to your participants that can supplement. They can't replace the mandated illustrations, the misleading mandated illustrations, but they can supplement them. And again, you or your advisor could go talk to the record keeper, your provider, and say, what can you do to help us out here? What can you do to help us provide additional, more meaningful information to our participants who are going to be confused when they get these illustrations in the next few weeks or months? Okay. So I'm done beating my drum on that, at least for the moment. But let's go back one slide, though. I do want to make a couple other points. I've already pointed out that you have to assume the spouse that the participant is married and has a spouse the same age and provide both single and joint and survivor 100% annuity illustrations. And then the DOL says, and here's the interest rate you have to use, and here's the mortality table that has to be used. So like I said, it's all spelled out. The next slide actually goes into a little more detail on that, and we really get down in the weeds. And I'm not going to take you all the way down into the weeds. I just want to point a few of these out. I've already said the mortality assumption is mandated. It's mandated to have a statement that the payments may vary. It's mandated to say these are just illustrations. Mandated to say there are no fiduciary. There are no inflation assumptions. So there's all these requirements that have to be explained as a part of the quarterly statement. So now the quarterly statement will show the participant's account balance. They generally show how the participant's invested. They'll also show the lifetime income illustration, and they will have all of these explanations about how the lifetime income illustration is calculated. Some of them are in minutia. For example, if there are any participant loans, it assumes that the loans have been repaid, unless the loan's in default. If the loan's in default, then it assumes that it hasn't been repaid or won't be repaid. I mean, the rules are really, really detailed. So when I said I wouldn't take you down into the weeds, I guess I did a little bit. I apologize for that. I just want to give you the feeling of how there's really, this is totally controlled and mandated by the government, but that you have the option to do something different. As I say in the note at the bottom of the slide, plan sponsors can provide additional illustrations. I really should have said additional projections, because these illustrations don't project. They simply assume that the money is annuitized and that the participant is age 67 on December 31, that both those things happen on December 31, where with projections you can do what I talked about earlier in terms of projecting earnings between the participant's current age and the retirement age. And by the way, there isn't a fiduciary safe harbor for these additional projections, which may be offsetting to some employers. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. for two reasons. One, uh, there are providers out there who have been giving projections for decades, not years, but decades. And as far as I'm aware, there's never been one claim by any participant anywhere that somehow misled them. Uh, Secondly, and as a partial explanation for that, uh, this isn't a scenario where you say to a 27-year-old participant today, your lifetime income illustration says you're going to have X retirement income. Come back in 40 years and see if we got it right. That's not what happens at all. Every year, that participant is given an update. That 27-year-old then at 28 gets a new projection adjusted for what's happened in between. At age 29, another illustration, and if you do projections, another projection. So here's some of the considerations for y'all to think about. If you have been providing projections already, and I don't mean illustrations, I mean if you've been providing projections through your record keeper to your participants, and many employers have. I don't want to leave you with the impression that projections are a new thing for generally, even though I've already said that some providers have offered projections for decades. Not all have. Some have just offered it more recently. Some employers have embraced that and have been providing them to their participants. They will be different than the illustrations your participants are going to be getting now. If you have been providing them already, you need to make a decision. Do you want to keep providing them? And if so, how are you going to explain to participants the difference between the projections and the illustrations? Work with your providers on that. Also, have you been providing a website calculator? Even if you don't know if you have or not, almost every plan provider has a website calculator on their website for your plan. So you probably have, as a practical matter, been providing a website calculator. I know that some providers are going to send out the illustrations in the next few weeks, and in the illustrator, they're going to include a statement that says, if you would like to do something more in more detail and perhaps more appropriate for yourself, there's a calculator on our website. Click here and go use the calculator. So in all probability, you will want to continue using that, but you need to know that you're providing it. And I recommend that perhaps you go look at it yourself and try it out, make sure that it's easy to understand, make sure that it makes sense, because your responsibility is to prudently select and monitor the provider and the provider's services, and this is one of the provider's services. So yes, I assume you all will want to continue providing projections. Maybe the committee members or the officers at the company, if it's a smaller company, could go look at the projections and see how they differ from the illustrations and get some sense of that. Your advisor can help you. Same thing with the website calculator. Also, do you want to provide education, such as materials or webinars that explain how to understand the illustrations? You wouldn't provide those yourself. I'm not saying you, the employer, would need to do that, but you, the employer, would need to be in charge of it. You're the decision maker. And you or your advisor could go to your provider, your record keeper, and say, hey, what other services do you have to provide educational content and information to our participants? So they understand these illustrations, they understand what's available on your website to help them do these calculations. And just how can you help them better understand what's going on here? Most providers will have support services. Some of them, though, won't automatically provide those unless you ask for them. Some other issues are, do you want to retain account balances of people who retire? You know, if you're with a small firm, you might be thinking, gee, why would I want to be responsible or liable for having other people's money who no longer work here? And I understand that. If you're with a large company, though, many large companies are deciding to retain balances. And they're deciding primarily for two reasons. One, they're already doing all the work to have a compliant plan. They're robustly selecting and monitoring their investments. They're looking at their expenses. They're getting advice from a consultant. Maybe they have an ERISA attorney who helps them avoid risk. So they're confident in their fiduciary processes and outcomes. So that's part one. Part two is they want to, as a matter of employee engagement, they want to say, look we have lower priced investments and services than you can possibly get in your own IRA. Matter of fact, significantly lower, because we have institutional share classes in your IRA. You're going to buy retail, and we can provide an opportunity to you to get investment management services, maybe even a guaranteed benefits, mutual funds and collective trusts that you could not get on your own in retirement. And therefore, we're going to offer this to you. And the idea is to better engage with our participants, to show that the participants, that they're really interested in them, looking out for their well-being, and looking at this almost as a womb to tomb type arrangement, certainly with beginning of employment until you pass away. And I guess there's a third reason as well, which is that larger plans that have been around for a long time are starting to pay out a lot of money every year. And it's not very well known, but there's now more money coming out of 401k plans than going into 401k plans. That's been covered up because of the stock market that's been so good for so many years. So yes, 401k plans have grown in assets, but because of market growth. Actually, as I said, more money's coming out than is going into them in terms of fresh dollars. And so therefore, some of those larger plan sponsors are saying, hey, we think that it would be good to retain assets in our plan. And retirees often have the largest account balances. Therefore, providing services for them would be a good way to retain them. So those are decisions that this is bringing up to the surface that plan sponsors need to make. Now I want to move to let me finish on this slide. One thought. What plans does this apply to? The questions have come up about, well, 457 plans, which are government plans, and 403B government plans on the one hand. This doesn't apply to government plans. It's a private sector plan issue. And so, for example, with a 401k plan, the defined contribution private sector plan would include, for example, a 401k plan, a profit sharing plan, a money purchase pension plan. And those are the plans that get the quarterly statements, and they would have to provide this annual illustration among the types of private sector plans that do have to provide income illustrations. Okay, let's flip over to the next slide now and talk about the safe harbor for lifetime income. To encourage plan sponsors to include annuities and other guaranteed benefits in their plans, the law was amended, but if you look at what the law says at first blush, it looks really hard. It says plan sponsors and fiduciaries have to engage in an objective, thorough, and analytical search. They have to consider the financial capability of the insurance company to satisfy its obligations, and they have to determine two things. One, that at the time of selection, the insurance company is financially capable. And secondly, that the cost of the contract, the individual contract, the annuity contract, for example, is reasonable. Let me divide those into two categories. First one is the insurer, the second one is the contract. If we go to the next slide, we see that the Congress and the Secure Act said, and we're going to make this really, really easy. For example, it lists, it says that for fiduciaries for the plan have to obtain certain written representations from the insurer. Then after getting those written representations, they can't have any other, the insurer can't come back and say, whoops, we were wrong, here's some new information. Or they can't the fiduciaries can't on their own know that there's some problem with the representations. They don't have to investigate. It's just on the face of it. So fiduciaries have to get the information, and they have to make sure that they got the information, and that's it. That's it for both initial selection, then each year thereafter for monitoring. Again, they should get those initial representations. Let's go to the next slide and see what I'm talking about in terms of the representations. Here's a list of the representations. This is a letter or a memo or a document that you would get from the insurer that says, we're licensed as an insurance company to offer these products. We're at the time that you select us, in each of the preceding 7 years, we have a certificate of authority to be an insurance company that hasn't been revoked. We have audited financial statements. We maintain the required reserves in the states where we're required to do business. You don't have to investigate this. You just have to get the insurance company to say this to you. Or we're not operating under an order of suspension. We undergo a financial examination every 5 years, and we promise to notify you if there are any changes. And insurance companies have already prepared this. Insurance companies that have products for retirement plans have this information prepared where they can just hand it to you. It's a checklist approach. Just make sure that each item on here is one of the things that the insurance company says is correct. And you've satisfied the fiduciary obligation to prudently select and monitor the insurance company and that it's financially capable. It could not possibly be any easier than this. So that is a fiduciary safe harbor. I think you can proceed with confidence in selecting an insurer for your fiduciary safe harbor. Then if we go to the next slide, I point out again that the safe harbor doesn't cover the selection of the contract. In that case, the law says that the plan fiduciary should do certain things. Now, let's face it, you're going to turn to your advisor and say to your advisor, please do this for us. So it's, and report back to us. And then based on that information, the fiduciary can make the appropriate determination. But the first one is engage in an objective, thorough, and analytical search. That's the exact same wording that applies to mutual funds. In other words, have an idea of what's available in the marketplace for your plan. That's what that really means in plain English. And your advisor should be able to say, well, here are the different products the different providers offer on their platforms that provide guaranteed income. Secondly, look at the costs, benefits, and services. Again, that's in terms of services and benefits. Is this an insurance company that has a history of providing guaranteed benefits? Is this an insurance company that has administered a lot of annuity type benefits in the past so that they're competent and capable? In terms of the cost, the question is the cost reasonable? And that would be looking at other products of the same type relative to the premium payments that are being made. Are the benefits roughly comparable? And in fact, the rule actually goes on to say you don't have to select the lowest contract cost. Instead, just make sure that it's a competitive cost, that it's reasonable within the context of what's being charged for similar products and services in the marketplace. Bottom line, though, is work with your advisor to do this. There's no reason that a plan sponsor or a plan committee should have to be an insurance expert to do this. Okay, let's move to the next slide. I just want to talk about the portability issue. And the Secure Act added a special provision to the law that permits 401k, 403b, and governmental 457 plans to provide a new distribution option if there is one of these guaranteed investment options in the plan, so that it can be, if the plan decides not to offer it anymore, for example, if you switch providers and the new provider won't record keep it, you can say to participants, hey, you don't lose your benefits here. You can roll it over into a rollover IRA and preserve your benefits. Virtually every insurance company that I've looked at that provides guaranteed benefits to retirement plans also provides a rollover IRA for exactly that purpose. But of course, that's a question you want to ask and get an answer to. And then on the final slide, let's just take a look at what some of the issues are. Do you want to allow people to stay on the plan and retire? Right now, unless an account balance is under $5,000, you can't force money out. That is, money can stay in the plan. But many 401k plans offer only lump sum distributions and minimum required distributions, which begin nowadays at age 72. Most retirees would prefer that your plan say, hey, you can have regular monthly distributions in retirement. So if you decide you want to keep people in the plan, then I think you want to add some provisions to your plan document, working with your record keeper, to say, you can take monthly payments out of the plan. If necessary, you can take an unscheduled payment for an unexpected expenses. So yes, you will need to make some changes to the plan document. Also, you want to negotiate with your record keeper that they will not charge retirees for each distribution taken by a retiree. Then in addition, I think you want to provide some additional investments or services. You could provide a guaranteed benefit where participants could have some guarantees of their withdrawals, or you could provide an investment management service for retirees. Those are out there available to plans. Or you could provide mutual funds or collective trusts that are specifically designed and invested for distribution purposes. So you would need to make, to support this, if you want to do it right, I think you need to make decisions not just about people being able to draw their money out, but providing, in addition to the investments that you already have that were selected for accumulation purposes, you would want to provide some investments or services designed for decumulation purposes. Okay, so those are my prepared comments. Let's just step back for a second and look at this. What's this really all about? First and foremost, it's all about helping participants understand whether or not they're going to have enough money to retire. So even though I've talked in the last half of the program a lot about distributions, that's the first thing, because people live month to month, more or less, in retirement. And knowing how much monthly income they will help them understand if they have enough money. Let's say that you provide illustrations and projections. And let's say a participant says, wow, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to get to retirement. I don't know what to do. There's yet another program that you can voluntarily offer called gap analysis. A gap analysis says, well, most experts say, and I'm going to put a number on this, but somewhere around 65 to 80%, it really varies, but 75%, for example, is a very common number. Your record keeper probably has some data on this where they can help you. But it says most experts say between Social Security and your retirement plan account balance, you need a 75% income replacement ratio in retirement. This is just a general rule of thumb. Your situation may vary. All that protective language the lawyers write, that'll all be there too. But you're now on course to only have 60% income replacement ratio in order to achieve that 80% hypothetical goal. You need to defer another $50 a pay period. That is gap analysis. So you look at where they are, where they could be, should be, and then you tell them how to fill in that gap. That is an additional service that can be provided to participants. And so if this is something that you'd like to do for your employees, talk to your advisor and provider about how to provide gap analysis to them. So there we go. First, how do we get them to have enough money? That's the big issue. The second issue really just applies to those of you that listening in that want to have, either provide annuity benefits for distributions, guaranteed benefits for people when they leave to be distributed, or the third group would be where you're willing to keep people in the plan after they retire. And that's typically larger companies that want to do that. But all in all, those are the issues you should be thinking about. I'd say right now, step number one, talk to your advisor, talk to your provider, get an understanding of when they're going to be giving these lifetime income illustrations. Take a look at what they look like. See if you want additional educational information or programs for your employees, and see if you want to provide projections as well as those income illustrations. In a sense, that's your homework right now. Make those decisions, investigate it, decide what's best for your company and for your employees. And I think you will have done a good job of following up on this program. So it's good to talk to you all today. Thanks for listening in. Back to y'all at Hub.
Thanks, Fred. On behalf of Hub International, thank you for attending today's webinar. If your question was not addressed in the content of the presentation, a retirement plan specialist will follow up with you to address your question. As a reminder, we ask that you please fill out the exit survey before you close your browser. Your feedback helps us as we develop future webinars. This now concludes our broadcast. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.